Have you ever stopped for a second and wondered what really happens when a person who always needed total control suddenly feels that control slip away? What happens when someone who acted untouchable, calm, and above it all is forced to face a reality they never planned for? This is where things begin to shake inside them. For a narcissistic person, losing control is not a small inconvenience. It is one of the most disturbing experiences they can go through. Control is not just something they enjoy. It is something they depend on. It helps them feel safe. It helps them feel stable. It helps them hold together the image they have built of themselves. In many relationships, they get used to knowing exactly how the other person will react. They expect attention on demand. They expect quick replies. They expect emotional reactions. They expect forgiveness. They expect access whenever they want it. Over time, that pattern gives them a strong sense of power. They begin to believe that no matter what they say or do, the other person will stay connected to them and remain within reach. But when someone finally walks away and keeps strong boundaries, that whole system starts to break. Suddenly, the narcissistic person cannot predict what that other person is thinking, feeling, or doing. They cannot guide the conversation anymore. They cannot trigger the same emotional response. They cannot control the story the way they used to. And that loss of influence creates deep discomfort. It removes one of the biggest things they used to lean on. Stay with me here, because this part matters more than most people realize. What hurts them most is not always the end of the relationship. It is the collapse of certainty. It is the shock of no longer being the center of someone else's emotional world. That moment can trigger anger, panic, obsessive thoughts, and desperate attempts to get back in. Not because of love, not because of real connection, but because control is gone. And without it, the hidden fear underneath starts to show. A narcissistic person often looks confident on the outside, but much of that confidence depends on what other people give them. Their sense of self is usually not as steady or as deep as it appears. They may look strong, sure, and impossible to shake, but that image is often being held up by constant reactions from the people around them. Praise feeds it, admiration feeds it, attention feeds it, social status feeds it. Even negative reactions can feed it, because any strong response proves they still have an effect. It proves they still matter. Instead of building a calm and lasting sense of worth from within, they often rely on outside approval to keep that feeling alive. This need can touch every area of life. In love, they may want endless reassurance and emotional investment. In social spaces, they may become fixed on image, status, success, appearance, or how others view them. Even small criticism can hit them hard. What seems minor to someone else may feel like a major attack to them, because it threatens the perfect picture they work so hard to protect. Positive attention supports that picture. Rejection, indifference, or silence can crack it. And when someone who once gave them a steady stream of validation finally walks away, the narcissistic person loses more than a relationship. They lose one of the main mirrors that help them feel important, wanted, and powerful. The attention is gone, the reactions are gone, the easy access is gone, the emotional supply they counted on is no longer there. That empty space can create deep insecurity, frustration, anxiety, and even fixation. They may rush to find fresh validation. They may try to pull the old person back in. They may become obsessed with proving they still have value. And this is where many people misunderstand what they are seeing. It is not just a person wanting attention. It is someone depending on outside approval to hold together their identity. And when that approval disappears, the ground beneath them starts to move in ways they do not know how to manage. No contact creates intense pressure because it shuts down the exact channels a narcissistic person uses to keep influence, information, and emotional control alive. In many relationships, they become used to staying connected in some form at all times. They may do it through direct messages, constant conflict, checking social media, asking mutual friends, or keeping emotional drama going just enough to stay present in the other person's mind. Even negative reactions can satisfy them because a strong reaction still proves there is a bond. It still shows they can reach you. But once no contact is put in place and held firmly, that entire stream is cut off. They no longer know what the other person is doing. They do not know who that person is with. They do not know how they feel, what they think, or whether they care at all. That silence becomes deeply uncomfortable because it destroys predictability. The person who once felt easy to read and easy to access is now completely out of reach. And that lack of access creates rising frustration. It creates restless curiosity. It creates mental pressure that keeps building. Silence is powerful because it leaves space for questions with no answers. Without communication, the narcissistic person cannot test their influence. They cannot get quick reassurance. They cannot control the story. They cannot defend their image in real time. They may start wondering if they have been forgotten, replaced, or erased. And for them, that can feel worse than direct rejection, because at least rejection gives them something solid to push against. Silence gives them nothing. No opening, no reaction, no proof, no certainty. And that is why no contact can hit so hard. It forces them to sit in uncertainty, and uncertainty is something they often cannot tolerate well. Their inability to monitor, manipulate, persuade, or provoke a response may lead to anxiety, anger, obsessive thoughts, and repeated attempts to break the silence. This is not random. It is what happens when both access and influence disappear at the same time. And once that happens, the old pattern they depended on can no longer protect them from what they are really feeling inside. The real fracture begins when the image a narcissistic person built of themselves can no longer be supported by what is happening in real life. A lot of their daily stability depends on believing they are special, unforgettable, highly desired, or always in control. That belief acts like a shield. It protects them from deeper feelings they do not want to face, feelings like shame, insecurity, weakness, or emotional pain. As long as people keep giving them admiration, attention, and compliance, that shield stays strong, their inner doubt stays hidden. But when a major source of validation is removed, especially after someone walks away and refuses to return, cracks begin to spread through that image. Suddenly, they are forced to face evidence that goes against what they believed about themselves. The person they thought would come back does not return. The person they assumed could not live without them keeps moving forward. The influence they relied on stops working. The control they counted on fades away. And that creates a painful conflict between fantasy and reality. If they are really as powerful as they claimed, why can they not fix this? If they are truly unforgettable, why is someone healing without them? Those questions are difficult because they strike at the center of the false image they depend on. As this pressure grows, emotional reactions often become sharper and more unstable. Mood swings may show up, defensiveness can rise fast, irritability becomes common. Obsessive thinking grows stronger. Sensitivity to criticism becomes even greater. They may work harder to find new attention, rewrite the past, shift blame, or make sudden moves to regain power. And this is the part many people never see clearly. Underneath the blame, the anger, and the dramatic behavior is a frantic effort to keep that ideal picture of themselves alive. The outside behavior looks chaotic, but the deeper struggle is simple. Their image is breaking, and they are trying to hold it together while reality keeps proving something they never wanted to admit. Then something else begins to happen. Certainty turns into obsession. The moment a narcissistic person can no longer feel sure they still matter to someone they once controlled, the mind often starts spinning. During the relationship, they may have felt very secure in the belief that they understood the other person fully. They thought they knew how that person would react, what they would feel, and how important they would remain in that person's life. That belief gave them comfort. It gave them power. It helped support their fragile self-image. But once that certainty disappears, a psychological void opens. The person who walked away is no longer explaining, defending, reacting, or giving emotional signals. Instead of receiving proof that they still matter, the narcissistic person is left alone with silence and unanswered questions. They may start wondering what the other person is doing right now. They may wonder if that person has moved on. They may wonder if someone new is already there. They may wonder if they are still remembered at all. That lack of information becomes hard to bear. So the mind keeps returning to it. Thoughts about the former partner may become constant. They may replay conversations. They may go over old memories. They may search for clues. They may check social media too often. They may ask mutual friends strange questions. They may imagine whole stories just to fill the empty space left by not knowing. What started as confidence slowly turns into fixation. And this is important, so do not miss it. That obsession is usually not proof of real love. It is often driven by the pain of uncertainty. Most people want closure, but for someone who relies on control, uncertainty can feel almost unbearable. Not knowing where they stand, not knowing if they still matter, not knowing if they can still affect the other person. That is what keeps the mind stuck. The less access they have, the more the thoughts may grow, the more silence they face, the more rigid the fixation can become. It is not romance, it is discomfort turning into mental preoccupation. A lot of people assume that when a narcissistic person quickly moves on to someone new, it means they are completely fine. It looks that way from the outside. A new relationship appears. There is attention again. There is excitement again. There is somebody new giving praise, time, focus, and emotional energy. It may seem like the past is forgotten and the old connection means nothing. But that is often a surface illusion. A new person can give temporary relief, not real healing. In the beginning, the new relationship may provide exactly what the narcissistic person feels they have lost. There is admiration, there is novelty, there is emotional intensity, there is fresh validation. This can feel powerful. It can soothe the wound for a while. It can help restore the image they think they need to maintain. The attention tells them they are still wanted. The praise tells them they are still important. The excitement helps distract them from rejection, loss, or uncertainty. For a short time, it can look like everything has been fixed. But the deeper issues beneath the surface do not disappear just because someone new arrived. The need for constant validation is still there. The fear of losing control is still there. The sensitivity to criticism is still there. The dependence on outside approval is still there. And as the new relationship becomes more real, the same old patterns begin to rise again. The new partner stops being just an exciting source of endless admiration and becomes a real human being with opinions, limits, moods, and needs. That is when the cracks return. Differences appear, disappointment appears. Real life enters the picture. And once that happens, the same insecurities that affected the past relationship begin to show again. The narcissistic person may start demanding more attention, showing more dissatisfaction, or feeling threatened when the new person is no longer giving nonstop emotional fuel. The replacement was supposed to remove the discomfort, but it only covered the surface for a while. The deeper vulnerability remained untouched. And when the shine fades, the same emptiness rises again, because what they were searching for outside themselves was never enough to solve what was happening within. As this process continues, anger and desperation often grow side by side. They may look like two different reactions, but they often come from the same source. Both are born from losing control, losing validation, and losing predictability. When a narcissistic person realizes that someone they once influenced so easily no longer responds in familiar ways, a wave of frustration can hit hard. The reality no longer matches their expectation. The anger comes from that clash. The desperation comes from realizing their usual ways of regaining control may no longer work. That is why these two emotions often mix together and create confusing behavior. The anger may show up first. They may blame the former partner for everything. They may attack their character. They may spread false stories. They may paint themselves as the victim. This helps them protect their self-image because it moves responsibility away from them and places it somewhere else. Admitting that someone chose to move on without them can feel unbearable because it challenges their belief in their own lasting importance. But under the anger, desperation is often growing quietly. They may become deeply focused on getting access again. They may send sudden messages. They may look for ways to run into the person. They may ask mutual connections for updates. They may watch online activity closely. They may search for any opening that lets them step back into that person's life. These attempts are not always about love. Often they are driven by the need to restore certainty and reduce the discomfort of emotional distance, and the harder those efforts fail, the more intense the cycle can become. More failed attempts create more frustration. More frustration creates a stronger urge to force control back into place. This is why behavior may shift fast from charm to blame, from nostalgia to hostility, from apology to attack. One moment they seem soft, the next moment they seem cold, then dramatic, then wounded, then angry again. If you have lived through that, you know how disorienting it can feel. But beneath it all is the same painful struggle. They are trying to regain a sense of power over a reality that is no longer responding to them. What many people do not fully see is that the deepest crisis is happening inside them, not outside them. The real battle is rarely just about one lost relationship. It is about being forced to face parts of themselves they have spent years avoiding. Many narcissistic behaviors are built as defenses. They protect against shame. They protect against insecurity. They protect against the pain of rejection. They protect against vulnerability. By focusing on status, admiration, achievement, power, appearance, or control, they can keep those deeper feelings pushed far into the background. As long as that system keeps working, they may never stop to ask what is underneath it. But once a major source of validation disappears, especially when someone leaves and refuses to return, that whole protective structure starts to weaken. The attention they leaned on is gone. The admiration is gone. The emotional investment is gone. The sense of control is gone. And without those outside supports, the deeper feelings become harder to avoid. Insecurity rises closer to the surface. Self-doubt grows louder. Loneliness can begin to press in. Feelings of weakness, fear, and inner emptiness may become more present than before. What makes this internal struggle so difficult is that it cannot be solved by quick outside fixes. A new relationship may distract them. More praise may soothe them for a moment. Success may help temporarily. Attention from strangers may provide a short lift, but none of those things touch the real wound. They do not heal the deeper instability, so the person keeps searching outside themselves for relief, while the true source of distress remains within. That creates a heavy tension. On one side, there is the desperate need to appear strong, superior, and fully in control. On the other side, there is the truth of unresolved pain and hidden vulnerability. Holding those two things at once takes enormous energy. And the longer self-examination is avoided, the more pressure builds behind the image they are trying so hard to defend. This is why silence from the person who left can feel so powerful. It does not just remove communication. It removes a mirror. It removes feedback. It removes the emotional proof the narcissistic person used to depend on. And when that mirror disappears, they are left facing themselves in a way they may not know how to handle. They may try to escape that feeling by getting louder, by becoming more dramatic, by pushing harder, by provoking reaction, or by rushing toward a fresh source of validation. But even when they seem busy, even when they seem to move on quickly, that does not always mean the internal pressure is gone. Often it just means they are trying not to feel it. The outer movement can hide a very unstable inner state. They may keep acting strong while feeling shaken. They may appear confident while privately spiraling. They may insult the person who left while still being mentally occupied with them. They may present a happy new chapter while quietly checking for signs that they still matter. This contradiction confuses many people because the outside performance does not match the inside reality. But that mismatch is exactly the point. The performance is there to protect the self-image. The internal collapse is what they are trying not to reveal. And that is why their actions can seem so inconsistent. One day they act above it all. The next day they try to reconnect. Then they attack. Then they disappear. Then they return again. It is all movement around the same wound. The loss of control. The loss of certainty. The loss of validation. And if you are watching this from the other side, it is important to understand something very clearly. Their reaction is not proof that your boundary was wrong. It is often proof that your boundary worked. It interrupted a pattern that once gave them comfort and power. It forced them into uncertainty. It removed easy access. And for someone who depended on that access, your silence can expose far more than any argument ever could. Keep listening because the final piece ties everything together in a way many people never hear explained clearly. When a narcissistic person seems close to a breaking point, what is happening is usually much deeper than heartbreak. To the outside world, it may look like simple rage, jealousy, obsessive contact, sudden replacement relationships, harsh blame, or dramatic attempts to return. But underneath those behaviors is a more painful internal collapse. They are not just reacting to the loss of one person, they are reacting to the loss of control over that person. They are reacting to the loss of certainty about where they stand. They are reacting to the loss of validation that used to help support their identity. And maybe most of all, they are reacting to being pushed toward parts of themselves they have long tried to avoid. That is the real crisis, because if control is gone, certainty is gone. If certainty is gone, the image begins to shake. If the image begins to shake, the hidden fear beneath it starts rising. And once that happens, the outside behavior becomes an attempt to put the system back together. Sometimes through anger, sometimes through charm, sometimes through guilt, sometimes through replacement, sometimes through silence followed by sudden return. But the goal is often the same: to get relief from the discomfort of no longer feeling powerful, central, or emotionally secure. That is why the pattern can look so intense. The outside actions may seem aimed at you, but the deeper struggle is with themselves. They are trying to escape the collapse of a self-image that depended too heavily on outside reactions. And if you were the one who walked away, this matters. It means their spiral is not always a sign of deep love or deep change. Very often, it is a sign that the old system stopped working, that the familiar supply was cut off, that the certainty they relied on was broken, and that for the first time in a long time, they are being forced to sit with a reality they cannot easily control, rewrite, or escape. So if you ever questioned what truly happens when you walk away, this is the answer. The narcissistic person does not simply lose a partner. They lose a structure. They lose access. They lose the predictability that made them feel secure. They lose a source of validation that helped hold up the image they depended on. They lose the emotional leverage that once gave them a sense of power. And in that loss, the cracks begin to show. The anger is often covering fear. The obsession is often covering uncertainty. The quick replacement is often covering emptiness. The blame is often covering shame. The dramatic attempts to return are often covering the discomfort of being unable to control the outcome. That does not excuse the behavior. It explains the force behind it. And understanding that force can help you stop taking every reaction personally. Because when they begin to collapse mentally after losing control, the real collapse is happening within the fragile system they built to avoid facing themselves. That is why strong boundaries matter. That is why no contact can be so effective. That is why your silence may speak louder than any final speech ever could. It removes the emotional material they use to shape, test, and manage their reality. It leaves them with uncertainty. It leaves them with themselves. And for a person who built so much of their identity around control, that can feel unbearable. If this helped you understand your own experience more clearly, hold on to that clarity. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop feeding a pattern that was never built on real mutual safety in the first place. And once you see that the chaos is often a reaction to losing power, not losing love, you start to understand the whole story in a completely different way.